Hey fiber friends, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to Tunisian crochet step by step. We will be creating this beautiful little swatch together, and you're going to learn two stitches, the Tunisian simple stitch and the Tunisian knit stitch, which are both completely beginner friendly stitches. Alright, so let's get into the yarn that we're going to use. Today we're going to use a worsted weight yarn. I think worsted weight yarn is going to be the best option for a beginner. This yarn calls for a 5.5 millimeter hook. It's recommended in Tunisian crochet to size up at least maybe 1 or 2 sizes on your hook because Tunisian crochet creates a very dense fabric and it tends to curl. So these are examples of hooks that you can use for the tutorial today. I don't recommend using any ergonomic hooks or any hooks that have any extra embellishments on them. You'll need a pretty straight hook because we're going to be putting loops directly onto that hook and you don't want anything blocking that. I'm going to be using a 6.5 Tunisian crochet hook. I'm sizing up 2 sizes above what the ball band recommends. Alright, so let's jump into this. You will start by creating a slip knot just as you would in regular crochet, and then we're going to create our chain, which is the same as you would create a chain in regular crochet. So we'll start by creating a chain of 13. So 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Now that we've completed our chain of 13, we're going to turn our chain over and work into the back bump of each one of those chains that we created. In Tunisian crochet, you'll want to keep your tension fairly loose and remember that the first loop always counts as a stitch, so we won't work into that first back bump, we're going to start in the second. So we're going to go under that second back bump, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So into the next back bump, you're going to go through, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You see now we have 3 loops, so you're going to do it again in the next back bump, yarn over and pull up a loop, go through, yarn over and pull up a loop. And it can be a bit finicky to get this foundation chain started, but it's definitely worth it because it's going to give you a nice even finished look on your edge. So we're going to go all the way down this foundation chain and we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop in each back bump as we go. So yarn over and pull up a loop, insert your hook through the back bump, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert your hook through the back bump, yarn over, pull up a loop, and insert your hook again through the last back bump and yarn over and pull up a loop. So after completing your first forward pass, you should have the same amount of loops on your hook as the amount of chains that you created. So let's count to be sure. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 loops on our hook. So again, you'll have the same amount of loops on your hook as the amount of chains that you initially created. So now we can start on our return pass. We're going to yarn over and pull through one of the loops, and we're going to hold that slightly so that that first loop doesn't tighten up on us because we're going to need to work back through that. Now we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2 of those loops, and we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 till we get to the end of our return pass. So yarn over, pull through 2, being sure to move those loops up your hook as you go, and this will get a lot easier as you get used to Tunisian crochet. So yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. Now that we've completed our return pass, you can see that our stitches have formed, and you'll see that it has a front vertical bar and a back vertical bar. For the Tunisian simple stitch, we will only be working in that front vertical bar. So remember, the first loop always counts as a stitch, so we won't work under that first vertical bar, we'll start under the second. So we're going to insert our hook under the second bar and yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're only working in that front vertical bar. So under the next bar, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. We're going to do that again, go under that front bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. Under the next front bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're going to continue this all the way down, remembering to keep our tension fairly loose and only work into that front vertical bar. And as we put our loops on the hook and they gather up, we'll need to push those loops up together so that we can continue to create our stitches. So again, we're going to go through that front vertical bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. Go through that front bar, yarn over, pull up a loop. Going through that front bar again, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now we're at our last stitch, which is worked a little bit differently, but it is always worked the same. As you can see, the last stitch has 2 bars, and we're going to go through both of those, but sometimes you can't really see both of them, so I'm going to pull those up here so you can see both of those bars. It does look tight, but your hook is going to glide right through those 2 loops. Just make sure that you get both of them on your hook so that you'll have a nice straight edge. So we're going to slightly turn our work towards us, and we're going to use our fingers as a guide to help slide both of those loops on our crochet hook. And they're going to go on pretty easily, and then we're going to yarn over, pull through, and then we'll have those 13 loops on our hook just as we did before. And let's count those just to be sure. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 loops on our hook. So now we can start on our return pass. And again, our return pass is going to start by yarning over and pulling through one of those loops. And we're going to hold that loop so that it doesn't tighten up too much. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2 until we get to the end of our row. Remembering to keep our tension fairly loose and to move those stitches closer to our hook as we go. And when you get to the end, you really don't have to move them up. The stitch and the work will kind of do it for you, and you can just kind of flow with the process. And now we can create our second row of Tunisian simple stitches. The Tunisian simple stitch is a really fun beginner-friendly stitch, and you can use it in so many different types of patterns. So remember, the loop on our hook counts as a stitch, so we're going to go under that second vertical bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. Under the next vertical bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. Under the next bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're going to continue to do that all the way down our row, forming our next row of beautiful, easy, simple stitches. So again, under that front vertical bar, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. Again, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. And continue that till we get to our last stitch. And then once we get to our last stitch, we're going to slightly turn our work towards us, use our fingers as a guide to slide those last 2 loops on, and then we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and we'll have those 13 loops on our hook again, and also another beautiful row of Tunisian simple stitches. And now we can start on our return pass. So remember, our return pass always starts the same with a yarn over and pull through 1. And we'll follow that with a yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2 until we get to the end of our row. At that point, we'll have 1 loop left on our hook. And remember, that loop does count as a stitch. And we also want to remember to keep our tension fairly loose. So we've completed that return pass, and now we can start on our next forward pass. Under that second front bar, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're going to continue that until we get to that last stitch on our row, making sure that our tension is fairly loose, and also making sure that we keep our stitches close to our hook, our loops close to our hook as we work them. So, because if we don't, it'll start to get tight as they pull back against you, and you really don't want your project to work against you. So we've made it to that last stitch. We're going to turn it towards us using our fingers as a guide and sliding those last 2 loops on there, and then yarn over and pull up that last loop. So again, you'll have 13 loops just as you did on each row before. And now we can move on to that infamous fun return pass by yarning over and pulling through 1 loop, keeping that fairly loose, and then yarning over and pulling through 2 until we get to the end of our row. And at that point, we will again have 1 loop on our hook that will always count as our first stitch. And this will be this way in any pattern that you work. That first and that last stitch is always going to be worked the same. So as you can see, we've completed our beautiful rows of our simple stitches, and you can see on the back it's very dense, so that's what creates that curl, because all of your stitches are worked on one side of the fabric. But you get a very beautiful drape when you work in Tunisian crochet stitches, and it's just a really fun repetition to work in. So let's do one more row of Tunisian simple stitches together, remembering to keep your tension loose. Also, remembering that you're only working through that front vertical bar only when creating this stitch. And we're going to do that all the way down until we get to the end of our row. And we're going to work our end stitch as we normally would, remembering that first stitch and that end stitch are always the same regardless of what the pattern that you're working. And then we're going to do that return pass by yarning over and pulling through 1, and we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, all the way until we get to the end of our row, and we'll complete that return pass. And once we've completed that pass, we'll only have 1 loop left on our hook. Again, that loop does always count as a stitch. And now we've completed that row, and you can really see those stitches have formed. You can also see what I was referring to when I was saying that Tunisian crochet tends to curl. So this is one of those things that you're definitely going to want to block once it's complete. But even without blocking the Tunisian crochet piece, it has a beautiful drape to it that you just can't resist. But to get rid of that curl, you're definitely going to want to block it. I think the only time you can get away with not blocking Tunisian crochet is if you're using multiple stitches in a pattern, or by adding tassels or a fringe border. That also will help add a little bit more weight and relieve the curl. So now we can get into our next stitch, which is the Tunisian knit stitch, and it's worked slightly differently. We're going to be inserting our hook through both of those vertical bars. So again, we're going to skip that first stitch, and we're going to insert our hook through those second set of vertical bars straight to the back of the work, yarn over and pull up a loop, and that's how you create the knit stitch. So let's try that again. So through both of those vertical bars of that first stitch, the second stitch, because the first loop counts as a stitch, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So in the next stitch, insert your hook through both of those vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're going to continue that until we get to our last stitch. So again, keeping your tension loose, insert your hook through both of those vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop. Insert through both of those vertical bars straight to the back of the work, yarn over and pull up a loop. Insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, and you'll see that knit pattern start to form there, but it'll definitely get more defined as we go along. So we're going to be at that last stitch. We're going to turn our work towards us, make sure we get through both of those last loops, and we're going to yarn over and pull up that loop. So we have those knit stitches that we started there, but it's going to be more defined once we get more rows on. Our return pass is exactly the same as before, yarning through that first loop, pulling through one of those loops, and then yarning over and pulling through 2 until we get to the end of our return pass, making sure we're keeping our tension loose and keeping our loops close to the tip of our crochet hook. So let's do another row of Tunisian knit stitch. So again, we're going to skip that first one because it counts as a stitch, and we're going to go between those first 2 vertical bars. Those second 2 vertical bars, and yarn over and pull up a loop through those. So through the next 2 vertical bars, insert your hook and yarn over and pull up a loop. And we'll continue that just as we did before until we get to the end of our row, keeping our tension loose and keeping those loops close to that hook as we can. So insert your hook between both of those vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now we're going to insert our hook through the last stitch, just as before, yarn over and pull up a loop. And remember, we're still going to have 13 loops here. So now we can do that return pass, just as before, yarning over and pulling through 1, and then pulling through 2, until we get all the way back to the beginning of our row. Again, we'll have that 1 loop on our hook that does count as a stitch. And just as a reminder, that first stitch and that last stitch are always work the same, no matter what stitch you're working in. On our next forward pass, we're going to insert that hook through those 2 vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop through each one of those stitches, just as we did on that previous row. So insert your hook through those 2 vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop. Insert your hook through those 2 vertical bars, yarn over and pull up a loop. Continue to do that, keeping your tension loose. The Tunisian knit stitch will curl a little bit more because it's being worked through the back of the work, so it creates a denser fabric. So we're going to do that return pass again, just as we did before, starting with that yarn over and pull through 1, then yarning over and pulling through 2, keeping those loops close to the edge of that hook so that it doesn't create any drag as you go along. And we'll have that 1 loop left on our hook once we get to the end of that row. And you can see that knit stitch really starting to come through, and it looks exactly like knit, which is what makes it really fun. So you can get a beautiful knit look without actually knitting. All right, so I would like to show you how we count the rows that we've created in Tunisian crochet, and we'll do that by counting the loops that the design makes on the right edge. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've created 4 rows of Tunisian simple stitch, and we've made 4 rows of Tunisian knit stitch. So by turning the work over, you can see the difference in the density of both stitches. The Tunisian simple stitch lays a little bit flatter than the knit stitch because the knit stitch is worked through the back of the work and pulled back forward. And the Tunisian simple stitch is just worked through that front bar. All right, so let's do our fasten off. So we're going to fasten off in a slip stitch using the Tunisian simple stitch. If you wanted, you could fasten off in a knit stitch as well, but we're going to do it with a Tunisian simple. And so you're going to insert your hook through the front of that vertical bar, yarn over, and then come right through that loop just as you would with a slip stitch and regular crochet. So you're going to insert through that first vertical bar and slip stitch. Insert through that front vertical bar and slip stitch. And this is what's called a fasten off. You do this to end your project so that your last row isn't full of loose loops. And also this would help if you wanted to join panels together. You'll have a nice even edge to do that with. So we're going to go through that front post, that front loop, and then slip stitch. Again through that front loop and slip stitch, and we'll do this all the way down. Even on that last stitch that has those 2 loops on it, we're going to get both of those loops on there, insert through, pull that through, and then slip stitch. Remembering to keep your tension loose when you do these because you don't want those slip stitches to create any more curl than the fabric is going to create on its own. Well, you have done it. You've created a beautiful Tunisian crochet swatch with 2 stitches, the Tunisian simple and the Tunisian knit stitch. Both have a beautiful drape even without blocking the fabric. You can see the different densities that both of them create on the back. One thing that I do want to show you really quickly is how we weave in our ends on Tunisian crochet. It's really easy because we're going to always do it on the back side. So the process is pretty much the same as you would follow with regular crochet. You just want to make sure that you're weaving in with light colors if you have multiple colors on your fabric. And you also can use these back bumps that the fabric creates to your advantage because there's going to be a lot of them. And you can weave right through those back bumps, going back and forth just as you would with regular crochet. So it's going to be maybe even a little bit easier to weave in ends with Tunisian crochet than with traditional crochet. But Nonetheless, you want to make sure that it's not too tight and that you're weaving it in as many times as you feel you need to feel comfortable. I would normally do more than 2, but I just wanted to show you a little example for the sake of the tutorial. And of course, you'll pull that a little bit, cut that off, and then pull it back out to release that tension that you just created. And I'm only going to weave in one of those ends on camera. So I really hope that this tutorial was beneficial to you and that you enjoyed Tunisian crochet. If you're looking for a pattern that uses these stitches, check out my runway shawl. It's a very easy, beginner-friendly pattern that I will have a full tutorial for on YouTube, as well as a written pattern for on my website and Etsy. Thank you so much for crafting with me today. Please like, follow, and subscribe for more content.